A coup attempt fails. Days later, Burkina Faso's military leader signs over one of the nation's most valuable gold deposits to a Russian mining giant. The timing isn't coincidence. It's calculation. President Captain Ibrahim Traoré just redrew the economic map of West Africa, and Moscow is holding the pen. The Now Gold project was never just another mining site. Buried beneath Burkina Faso's arid soil lies a resource that governments topple over, that empires chase, and that desperate nations bet their futures on. Gold. And now, it belongs to Nord Gold, a Russian state-adjacent corporation with operations from Guinea to Kazakhstan. The message Traore is sending isn't subtle. This isn't about mining contracts. This is about power, survival, and choosing sides in a continent where neutrality is becoming extinct. Burkina Faso has been bleeding for years. Jihadist insurgencies, displacement, collapsed governance in rural regions. The kind of instability that makes traditional Western partners nervous. France, once the dominant force in the Sahel, has been systematically ejected from the region. Mali kicked them out. Niger followed. Burkina Faso made it clear French influence was no longer welcome. But nature abhors a vacuum, and so does geopolitics. Russia stepped in, not with humanitarian aid packages or diplomatic niceties, but with Wagner Group mercenaries, arms deals, and now, economic infrastructure. The failed coup attempt that preceded this agreement tells you everything about the pressure Traore is under. Military juntas don't last by being loved. They last by being feared, funded, and fortified. Traore knows this. He's 20 months into power, seized through his own coup in September 2022, and he's already survived an assassination attempt. Every day he remains in office is a testament to ruthless pragmatism, not popular mandate. Handing Nord Gold access to Now isn't generosity, it's insurance. Russia doesn't just extract minerals. It extracts loyalty. This is where the stakes become clear. Burkina Faso isn't pivoting to Russia because Moscow offers better development terms. It's pivoting because Russia offers something the West increasingly won't: unconditional support. No lectures about democracy. No human rights clauses buried in aid agreements. No pressure to hold elections or negotiate with rebels. Just guns, gold contracts, and geopolitical cover. For a leader like Traore, that's worth more than any French-backed stabilization program. But what happens next could redefine the region. Burkina Faso's move isn't isolated. It's part of a cascading realignment across Francophone Africa. Countries that once orbited Paris are now drifting into Moscow's gravity. The alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, formalized their break from the French-led economic community of West African states in 2024. They're building a new regional order, and Russia is the external guarantor. The gold flowing out of Now will fund that vision. It will buy weapons, pay soldiers, and signal to neighboring regimes that there's an alternative to Western partnership. Western capitals are watching, but their leverage is gone. Sanctions are difficult when you've already been frozen out. Diplomatic pressure rings hollow when your embassies are emptied and your influence dismantled. The European Union can issue statements. The United States can condemn authoritarian backsliding. But Ibrahim Traoré isn't listening. He's counting Russian rubles and calculating survival in real time. The Now Gold project isn't just an economic asset. It's a geopolitical anchor. It ties Burkina Faso's fortunes to Russian extraction, Russian logistics, Russian markets. It makes Moscow a stakeholder in Traoré's survival, and that creates a feedback loop. The more dependent Burkina Faso becomes on Russian economic lifelines, the harder it is to reverse course. This isn't a deal. It's a lock-in.
Burkina Faso just signed a gold mining deal with a Russian corporation. But here's what makes it different. This isn't about selling off the country's wealth. It's about taking it back. President Captain Ibrahim Traoré isn't just cutting deals. He's rewriting the rules of who controls African resources, and every foreign mining executive operating south of the Sahara is paying attention. The Nord Gold Agreement for the Now project didn't happen in a vacuum. It's one piece of a larger, more aggressive strategy that Traoré's government has been executing since seizing power. Nationalizing mines, tightening export controls, building a national refinery, reviewing every foreign license signed under previous regimes. This is resource nationalism on fast forward, and it's happening in one of the world's fastest-growing gold producers. Burkina Faso isn't asking for a bigger share anymore. It's demanding ownership. For decades, African nations have watched their minerals leave in shipping containers, while profits disappeared into offshore accounts. The pattern was predictable. A fragile government signs a sweetheart deal with a multinational. The company extracts maximum value under minimum taxation, and the host country sees a fraction of what its resources are worth on global markets. Burkina Faso lived that reality for years. Gold flowed out. Poverty stayed. Traoré's government looked at that equation and decided it was done playing by those terms. Nationalizing mines is the most direct move. When the state takes operational control, it removes the middleman. No more negotiations over royalty percentages or profit-sharing formulas. The gold belongs to Burkina Faso, mined by Burkina Faso, sold by Burkina Faso. It's economically radical and politically risky, but for a military leader with limited legitimacy and even less patience, it's also logical. Traoré doesn't need Western approval. He needs revenue, fast, to fund a government fighting jihadist insurgencies and managing a collapsing rural economy. But nationalization alone isn't enough if you can't process what you extract. That's where the national refinery comes in. For years, Burkina Faso's gold left the country as raw ore, refined elsewhere, marked up elsewhere, and sold elsewhere. Building domestic refining capacity means capturing that value domestically. It means jobs, technical infrastructure, and leverage. A refinery transforms Burkina Faso from an extraction site into a processing hub. That shift changes everything, not just economically, but strategically. Tightening export regulations is the enforcement mechanism. You can nationalize mines and build refineries, but if gold still leaks out through unofficial channels or under outdated agreements, sovereignty remains theoretical. Traoré's administration has been clamping down on exports, reviewing licenses, and making it clear that the era of minimal state oversight is over. Every foreign company operating in Burkina Faso is now subject to renegotiation. Some will accept the new terms. Others will be forced out. Either way, the balance of power has shifted. This is where the stakes become clear. Traoré isn't just managing Burkina Faso's gold sector. He's sending a signal across Africa. Resource nationalism isn't a fringe policy anymore. It's becoming the default position for governments that feel they've been exploited for too long. Mali has pursued similar policies. Zimbabwe has nationalized lithium and platinum assets. The Democratic Republic of Congo is renegotiating cobalt contracts. The trend is unmistakable, and Burkina Faso is accelerating it. What happens next could redefine the region. If Traoré's strategy succeeds, if the national refinery comes online, if revenues increase, if the state consolidates control without triggering capital flight or economic collapse, it becomes a model. Other African leaders will take note. Investors will recalibrate risk. The terms of engagement between African governments and foreign mining corporations will fundamentally change. But if it fails, if mismanagement, corruption, or lack of technical capacity derails the plan, it reinforces the narrative that African states can't manage their own resources. The stakes are that high. The Nord Gold deal fits into this framework because Russia doesn't impose the same conditions Western firms do. Moscow doesn't demand transparency reports or environmental impact studies or anti-corruption clauses. It offers capital, technical support, and political cover in exchange for access. For Traoré, that's a trade worth making. He gets the refinery, the nationalization, the control, and a partner willing to work within his framework, not against it. Burkina Faso is betting its economic future on a single gold deposit. The Now Gold project isn't just another mining site. It's being positioned as the cornerstone of national development, the revenue stream that will stabilize a collapsing economy and justify a military government's grip on power. President Captain Ibrahim Traoré needs this deal to work. Because if it doesn't, there's no plan B. The government's pitch is straightforward. Increased revenue, job creation, higher gold production. On paper, it's the development model every resource-rich African nation has chased for decades. Extract the mineral wealth, funnel the profits into state coffers, create employment, and use the economic lift to build legitimacy. It's a clean narrative. But the gap between projection and reality in African mining has always been where promises go to die. Revenue is the headline promise. Gold is Burkina Faso's largest export, accounting for the majority of foreign exchange earnings. The Now project is expected to significantly boost production capacity, and if the state can capture a larger share of that output through the Nord Gold Agreement, it could mean billions in additional revenue over the life of the mine. For a government facing mounting security costs, displaced populations, and crumbling infrastructure, that money isn't abstract, it's survival. Traoré's administration is fighting a multi-front jihadist insurgency that has destabilized vast swaths of the country. Funding that war requires cash, and gold is the most reliable source Burkina Faso has. But revenue projections are only as good as the structures built to capture them. This is where the risk intensifies. Burkina Faso's institutional capacity to manage large-scale mining operations, enforce contracts, and prevent revenue leakage is fragile at best. Corruption has historically siphoned off mining profits before they reach national budgets. Weak regulatory oversight has allowed foreign companies to exploit loopholes, underreport production, and minimize tax obligations. Traoré's government claims it's tightening controls, but institutional reform doesn't happen overnight, especially in a country where governance has been repeatedly interrupted by coups. Job creation is the second pillar of the economic argument. Mining projects promise employment, and in a nation where youth unemployment is staggeringly high, that promise carries political weight. But the reality of job creation in industrial mining is more complicated. High-skill positions go to foreign technical experts. Low-skill labor is often contracted out, temporary, and concentrated in specific regions. The majority of Burkina Faso's population won't see direct employment from now, and those who do will be vulnerable to the boom-bust cycles that define extractive industries. When global gold prices drop, mines scale back. Workers are laid off. The promised economic stability evaporates. Higher gold production is the measurable output, the metric that will determine whether this gamble pays off. Burkina Faso is already among Africa's top gold producers, but production has plateaued in recent years due to insecurity, aging infrastructure, and investor hesitation. The Now project is designed to reverse that trend. If it succeeds, Burkina Faso could see production levels rise significantly, positioning the country as a more dominant player in regional and global markets. That increased output doesn't just mean revenue, it means geopolitical leverage. A country that controls a larger share of gold production has more negotiating power with buyers, more ability to dictate terms, and more strategic relevance to external actors like Russia. This is where the stakes become clear. The economic benefits of Now are real, but they're conditional. They depend on competent management, transparent revenue flows, stable security conditions, and sustained global demand for gold. Any one of those variables can collapse. Jihadist groups control significant territory in Burkina Faso's mining regions. Attacks on mining operations have increased. If Now becomes a target, production halts, revenue disappears, and the entire development strategy crumbles. What happens next could redefine how Burkina Faso approaches its economic future. If the Now project delivers the promised revenue, jobs, and production increases, it validates Traoré's resource nationalism and strengthens his political position. It proves that a military government can leverage natural resources for national development without Western oversight. But if the project underperforms, if corruption persists, if jobs don't materialize, or if security threats disrupt operations, the narrative shifts. Then, now becomes another example of African leaders overselling resource deals while their populations remain poor. Burkina Faso just handed majority ownership of one of its most valuable gold deposits to a Russian mining corporation. The government is calling it economic development. Critics are calling it the same old exploitation with a different flag. The Now Gold project is supposed to deliver revenue, jobs, and sovereignty, but Nord Gold controls the majority stake. So the question isn't whether Burkina Faso benefits. It's how much and whether that's enough. This is the paradox at the heart of Burkina Faso's geopolitical pivot. President Captain Ibrahim Traoré has positioned his government as a champion of resource nationalism, reclaiming African wealth from foreign exploitation. But the Now Agreement doesn't nationalize the gold. It privatizes to a Russian entity. Nord Gold, not the Burkinabe state, holds majority ownership. That means operational control, profit distribution, and strategic decision-making rest primarily in Moscow-aligned hands, not Ouagadougou. The framing is sovereignty. The structure is dependence. Majority ownership matters because it determines who captures value. In any mining operation, the entity with the largest stake dictates terms. They decide how much gets reinvested locally versus repatriated abroad. They determine employment practices, environmental standards, and revenue transparency. They control the data, production volumes, cost structures, profit margins, and that information asymmetry gives them negotiating leverage the state can't easily challenge. Burkina Faso will receive royalties, taxes, and perhaps a minority equity share. But the bulk of the wealth generated, by now, will flow to Nord Gold shareholders. That's not sovereignty. That's a transaction. The concern isn't hypothetical. Africa has watched this pattern repeat for over a century. Foreign corporations extract minerals, claim the profits, and leave host countries with marginal gains and environmental degradation. The French did it. The British did it. Chinese state enterprises do it. Now Russian firms are doing it. The actors change. The structure remains. Burkina Faso's government insists this time is different because the partnership aligns with national interests, but majority foreign ownership inherently limits how different it can be. You can't control what you don't own. This is where the stakes become clear. Traoré's broader rhetoric emphasizes breaking free from extractive economic systems that have impoverished Burkina Faso for decades. He's nationalized some mines, tightened export controls, and challenged Western dominance in the region. But the Now deal doesn't break the extractive model. It redirects it. Instead of French or Canadian companies holding majority stakes, it's a Russian corporation. The nationality changes. The fundamental dynamic doesn't. Burkina Faso still plays the role of resource supplier, not resource owner. Yet there's a geopolitical calculation here that goes beyond pure economics. Traoré isn't choosing Russia because Nord Gold offers the best financial terms. He's choosing Russia because Moscow provides political cover, military support, and ideological alignment. Russia doesn't lecture Burkina Faso about democracy or human rights. It doesn't impose governance conditions or demand electoral timelines. It offers a partnership model where economic extraction and political autonomy can coexist. For a military leader facing international isolation and domestic insurgency, that trade-off may be worth the reduced state ownership of Now. But the trade-off has consequences. If Nord Gold's majority ownership means limited state control over revenue flows, Burkina Faso's ability to fund development, infrastructure, and security remains constrained. If profits are repatriated rather than reinvested locally, the promised economic transformation stalls. If the state lacks leverage to renegotiate terms when needed, Burkina Faso ends up locked into a structure that benefits Russia more than itself. That's not a partnership of equals. That's dependency with geopolitical branding. What happens next could redefine how African resource nationalism is understood. Is it genuine state control over national wealth, or is it simply choosing which foreign power gets to extract it? The Now project will answer that question in real terms. If Burkina Faso's minority stake translates into meaningful revenue, transparent governance, and sustained development, then the model holds. If it doesn't, if the gold leaves, the profits disappear, and the population remains poor, then Traore's sovereignty rhetoric collapses into another example of African leaders trading one form of extraction for another. The ore is being pulled from the ground. The machinery is Russian. The profits are majority Russian. The sovereignty is claimed to be Burkinabe. But ownership structures don't lie. They reveal who holds power, who captures value, and who bears risk. Burkina Faso has a minority stake in its own gold deposit, and that reality defines everything that follows. The question isn't whether this deal challenges long-standing extractive systems. It's whether it replaces them, or just rearranges who's doing the extracting. The gold is moving. The ownership is clear. And the answer will be written in revenue reports, not rhetoric.